Today's video, I'm going to show you the process I go through in storing my sewing patterns. Hi everyone, welcome back to the Sewpapilla channel. If you're new here, welcome. I'm so happy that you're here. Today's video, I'm going to show you the process I go through in storing my sewing patterns. So a little backstory why I do this. I work full-time Monday through Friday, and I am off on weekends. So during the week when I get off work, I don't have a lot of extra time to do any sewing projects or planning or prepping, and so I save all of that for the weekend. And when the weekend arrives, it doesn't really leave me enough time to do a lot of sewing. So I've decided to research a little bit, and I did find some other channels on YouTube that showed some amazing organizational systems, and I found the one that I'm going to show you today. I've stuck with this system for a couple of years now. It may not work for everybody, but it works so great for me. I have my personal sewing patterns that I've created, DIY'd or hacked, and I also have my commercial sewing patterns such as Simplicity, McCall's, Vogue, and more. And I also, in the back here, I have my indie sewing patterns. So if you're interested, keep watching. This here is my sewing pattern album. This is where I store all of my envelopes for my sewing patterns, my indie patterns, and my personal patterns that I had created. And whether I am working on a new sewing project or if I purchase a new sewing pattern, this is the process that I go through. I will go over the new sewing pattern. I'll look in the back for the measurements and figure out the yardage that I'll need for fabric, the sizing that I'll need for the project, and I'll fill out this worksheet, and it basically is just filling in the size, the quantity of the yardage that I'll need. Is it a paper pattern or a digital pattern? What kind of fabric will I be using with this project? And I have an area here where I can sketch, and you can barely see it, and it's on purpose. You can barely see the croquis where you can draw some additional customization, or if you want a pattern hack, or just write some special notes for the project that you're working on. And now I'm going to walk you through how I got to this point. The first thing that I'll do is take the tissue paper pattern outside of the envelope and select the correct size that I'm going to be working with, and I'll iron out all of the wrinkles and prep the sewing pattern for tracing. That way I can create a secondary sewing pattern. This way, at a moment's notice, if I have the inspiration to make up this sewing pattern, it's good to go. And when I'm ready to sew the project, all I have to do is pull the secondary pattern out of the envelope and give it a good press, and I can start my sewing project. If I ever have a sewing pattern that I use quite often, what I'll do is I'll use my Fiskars 1-inch hole punch and punch a hole in the pattern and hang it up in my studio for easy access. And of course, if I'm not going to be using my sewing pattern, I'll just fold it up nicely and fit it back into the envelope, and then I'll put it back in the bin and store for later. I'm going to start off by going over everything that I used to create my sewing pattern system, and I'll go over it one by one. It won't take very long. Just real briefly, I have a 3-ring binder, I have a clipboard, and my spreadsheets where I document the information from the sewing patterns. I have my sewing patterns here that I've created or pattern hacked or DIY'd. And in this stack here, I have the commercial patterns such as Butterick, McCall's Simplicity in Vogue, and so on. And in the back, I have my indie patterns. And I like to store my traced out sewing patterns in brown letter size envelopes. I use the craft paper envelopes, and they're very roomy. If you have, you know how it's really hard sometimes to get these sewing patterns back into the tiny envelopes when you purchase them for the paper sewing patterns anyways. But yeah, anyways, I chose this color. It's real natural and I like it. They come in different colors if you choose, if you want the white or the manila color or the brown. They offer all three. And also if you want different colors, you know, pinks and blues and greens, they do offer that as well. And oh yes, and this has the clasp. I prefer the clasps rather than the tie string. The tie string tends to get tangled up quite a bit, so I stay away from that. And then next up I have these clear, they're called clear coupon envelopes, and they're plastic, and I put my sewing patterns in here and it protects them, keeps them from aging and getting destroyed in the process of moving and you know, removing the patterns in and out. So they're really good to help protect the sewing patterns, and I like them because you can put them in, you can see what the sewing pattern is in the front, and then you can just flip it over to the back side and you have all of your measurements and protocols for this sewing pattern. So I like that. And these envelopes do not come with punched out holes. I had to do that myself, and it did not come with this decorative tape. This is the washi tape. It's just a decorative embellishment that I added myself to the envelope to give it a little bit more pizzazz, because that's how I roll. And or you can just leave it blank and go with that. So it has a little Velcro button. You can slide anything in there. I use my sewing patterns, just close it up. It's really easy access. And when I ordered these from Amazon, and when you order them from Amazon, they come to me like this. Let's go ahead and get started. Here's my collection of sewing pattern covers for my envelopes. You can keep it very simple and just make a copy of the sewing pattern that you want to use. And I'll show you what I did for mine. I used Canva to make my templates for my envelope covers, and Canva is just a digital online website or app where you can go to create super great designs and templates. And this video isn't sponsored by Canva. I just wanted to share where I made mine. This isn't going to be a tutorial on how to make templates from Canva, but I just wanted to share what I did real quick. And for those of you who do use Canva, you can follow along if you like. My document layout is in letter size, and I selected an image that I wanted to place on my document, which is the McCall's pattern. And then I added a border around it. And then I selected text, so I'm just going to give my document a title, and I will put the name of the sewing pattern and the sewing pattern number, and below it here on the bottom I'm going to label it address, since that's what this pattern is. Next up, if I'm happy with the way the document looks, I'll go back to the sewing pattern image and change the color image into a black and white color scale. And I do this to save ink on my printer. It seems like my color ink uses up very quickly, so I can save money just by doing the black and white. Once I have the document how I want it, I'm going to go ahead and download it. and I'll change the file type to PDF print, and I'll ensure that it's the CMYK because that's the best for printing. And then since I have multiple pages, I don't want to print out all of my pages, so I'll just select the one that I'm working on, which is number 48. I'll just click that and click done, and then I'll download, and I'll save it to my files on my computer. Once I download the files, I can open up the PDF and view all of my templates, and I'm ready to print. Once your PDF is open, you can print your document. I chose a 5x7 size because I can use less ink, and I have this photo paper that I wanted to use up since I've had it for many, many years. And it was a 5x7 photo paper, and I actually like the way they came out. I prefer this over a single sheet of paper. There are 3 reasons why I process my sewing patterns this way. For the first reason, if I store the pattern envelopes in a binder, it's for easy viewing. I'll remove the contents of the sewing pattern envelope and place it in a brown envelope, and this way there's less bulk when viewing in the binder. I can just turn the page very easily. The second reason why I like to do this way is because once I have sewn a sewing pattern and I have the proper measurements cut out and the pattern is perfect, I like to save it separately in an envelope. That way, when I'm ready to sew up another project, it's ready to go. And third, it's a time saver, and I like to stay organized. Like I said, if on the weekend, when the weekend comes and I'm in the mood to sew a dress, all I have to do is go to my binder, find the project that I want to work on, and then I'll come over and pull an envelope, pull out the pattern, and I'm ready to go. I have 2 indie patterns here that are pretty much ready to go. I've already prepped the envelope and the envelope cover. And so what I will do is go ahead and put everything in the envelope. As you can see, I haven't traced the patterns yet, but I will get to that eventually. I'll iron out the tissue paper, and I'll trace over with regular pattern paper, and then I'll fold it back up and I'll put it in the envelope here, and when I'm ready to use it, everything will be ready and prepared for me. Now for my patterns and the indie patterns, I won't have the envelopes in my 3-ring binder. That's because it didn't come with envelopes, obviously. But I will have printouts, just of regular letter size printouts to view in the binder. And I'll show you that here in just a minute. And now I have my sewing patterns here in the back, and obviously since I don't have the paper sewing patterns, I'm going to do the same as the indie patterns and just make copies of everything that I've made So I can use this as a reference if I decide to make either the same pattern again, or if I have an inspiration come through that I want to take some pieces from one pattern and from another. I have it right here all in one place. And same thing, if I want to jot down any notes for any of the projects for a future project, this is here and ready to go. It's all together. And then now I have a Butterick sewing pattern, and I haven't used this one yet, so I have not prepped the pattern. I have not traced it out yet, but I will get to that. So what I'll do is I'll remove the contents from the pattern. I'll put the pattern pieces in my brown envelope, and I'll secure the clasp. And I already have my cover. This is the old cover that I used. As you can see, it doesn't look like my newer version. And let me see here. Oh, here it is right here. So here's the updated version. I'm going to go ahead and update it. Now the nice thing about these envelopes here is this is glued on, and this has been on here for at least 2 years now. And look how strong these envelopes are. I can literally pull it off and there's hardly any damage to it. So that's great. I mean, I'm not going to make a habit of doing that all the time, naturally, but it's nice that it does work so well for my updates. So I'm going to go ahead and glue just a little bit around the corners. And I usually use like a paste, you know, like those roll-on pasty glue sticks, and I couldn't find it. So I'm using this clear glue, washable clear glue from Elmer's, and it seems to be holding up very well. And I'll just center it on the envelope. And it dries pretty quickly. And the nice thing about this, using these 5x7 photo papers, is that it doesn't bleed through. And let me show you an example of bleeding through. Just a second. So this is one that I did previously, and as you can see, it's just a piece of paper, a printer paper. And I printed it out, and I was going to just glue the printed paper onto the envelope just as is. And when I used this, you can see where I glued, and it says it's clear glue. Yeah, it's clear glue, but it didn't dry very well, and you can see it's kind of messy looking, so I wasn't really pleased with that. So I decided to go away with this idea and just stick with the photo paper, and or you can even use cardstock. If you have some cardstock, you can use that as well. But since I've had this photo paper for 20 years or more, I thought I'd go ahead and just use that instead. So anyways, this is ready to go, and I'll put this here in my commercial sewing patterns, and I have this in alphabetical order and numerical order. I will find a place for it. So Butterick 5925. It'll go here. Right. So it's going to go right here. So what I'll do is, I already have some extras prepared in the back here, but I've already made some up. I'll just in here, so that way when you flip it over, you can read all the details of the pattern very easily. Okay. And I have it, I go back and forth since there's only enough room for 2 holes. Oops, I'm backwards. There we go. This way. I think I'm going to turn it around the other way. There. So I flip it over and it has easy access. See? And when you remove the contents of the sewing pattern, you don't have all that bulk. Because look, this has all of the sewing patterns that I own. Oops, it's not heavy at all. And here you go. They're all nice and neatly organized in my binder. So, just real quick, if you flip it all over, I have some pre-made envelopes ready to go for my future sewing patterns. And then the further you go along, I have a section for my indie sewing patterns, but I don't have the envelopes to put in here as I do for the commercial sewing patterns. So I just have a paper printout of the image of the sewing pattern, so I know which sewing pattern it goes to. So here briefly, I'm going to put you on a time lapse, and I'm going to knock out just a few of my sewing patterns, and then I'm going to move on to the commercial sewing patterns. I really wanted to get those done and put away, and I'll be right back. I just wanted to jump on here real quick. It's habit for me to write what the contents are inside the envelope, and I'd like to do that way. If you run out of time and you don't have a cover image for your envelope, you can just write down what's inside real quick. That way you don't forget. I'm finishing up the last bit of sewing patterns to put into the binder, and I did quite a bit today, and hopefully by now you'll have an idea of how I process and store my sewing patterns. And I hope I was able to throw some tips at you. And again, like I always say, this may not be for everybody, and it definitely works for me. And you know, with a few extra pennies, it would be worth spending the money for the tools and supplies needed for this. But it's up to you, and I really hope that I helped in explaining how I process this. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below, and if you liked this video and it helped out, I would love for you to give me a like. I'm going to go ahead and end the video right here. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and if you did, I would love it if you give me a like. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel, I would love for you to consider doing so. And if you are subscribed to my channel, I want to thank you again so much. I'm always so grateful. Okay, that's it for today, and I will see you next week. Bye.